Intentional learning, if we all did this more, the intentional learning doesn't require as much vulnerability. But learning right now does, because of the systemic things, the judgment that we've heard, right? All those things. If you learn differently, there is vulnerability in learning, and it doesn't have to be that way. I think that's why words like feedback, criticism, and critique are so harsh. It's that vulnerability piece, right? But instead, if we were all doing this, we were all expressing what we needed, who we are, how we're growing, having these open conversations, then it'd be more of a like, we're giving each other permission to speak truth into each other when needed. Hi, I'm Amber.
And I'm Elayna. We're glad you're here to join us where
everything is learning. Hi.
Hello.
Ooh, that was a fun hello today.
Yeah,
that was a new greeting.
Super pumped to talk to you.
I love that. I'm super pumped to talk to you and learn from you. I'm excited about that.
Oh, me too. I love learning from you.
I love learning from you, learning with you, hanging out with you.
Yeah.
I love our little chats.
Journey.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Our little coffee conversations during the day. Yeah, it's kind of nice. Yeah.
It is nice.
Right?
I like that. Coffees and combos.
Mm-hmm. I like this coffee cup too.
In my life.
Right? That's funny. Convo. Oh my God, you want to have a convo about that? No, I don't. Thank you. I'll have a conversation though. Oh my God. Sometimes. So I've been doing a lot of thinking. Let me just jump right in.
Yeah.
Mainly because my brain is either I don't even know what's going on. I feel like not fully present today, just as a heads up, little caveat to you. We all good. More adventures in Amber's brain today. Oh God. It's fun. It's a fun place, guys. It's a fun place. I promise. So I've been thinking about like all of our conversations, knowing yourself, knowing your kid, whoever, whatever we're looking at today, whoever you're thinking of. I think of myself because I'm selfish and self-absorbed. No, I'm kidding. I just don't have kids to think about.
And I'm going to stop you.
I think that if I had kids, I would be using so much of what we talk about, like in thinking about my children. I just don't have them. So I think about myself and my partner, but I think about his brain more than my brain. So it's fine. We're already, anyway, I'm telling you, I'm all over the place. I need more coffee or something. But I was thinking about how in this journey of like understanding yourself and accepting yourself, how you operate, how your brain works, whatever, just like, okay, it is what it is, right? Like free of judgment or criticism or any of that. You're just kind of like the core here is just to say, all right, here's who I am. Here's how my brain works. Here's what I got. Here's what I come to the table with. Right.
Right.
And I think, yeah. And a lot of it, that's getting to that's step one in a way is like, okay, here I am.
Right.
I accept that this is where the airplane has brought me. Here I am. Right. Like I didn't pick this path. I didn't pick this destination, but I'm here. Fabulous. Let me get a lay of the land, basically. And then like from there, that's kind of where we go. A lot of that is like that unlearning thing, right? Kind of shifting how we thought about ourselves, how we thought about brains, how we've been made to think about ourselves, our brains, all of that over time. And at its core, like we really have to be able to think flexibly, right? Have flexible thinking about anything to unlearn it. First off, we have to be able to like see it from another side, kind of question, is this truth? Look at it from another perspective, all that kind of stuff. And so I think that like thinking, like flexible thinking and creativity and community, all of those three things are so important on this like journey. Once you've arrived at that place of, okay, here's who I am, here's what I come to the table with. Even as you're still exploring that, just kind of, maybe if you're not even fully know where you are, you haven't got the lay of the land yet, just accepting here's who I am kind of a thing. This is good, I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. I mean, the last time we talked about our brains and
Yeah.
understanding our brains. And what we kind of shared was that on our personal journeys, we found that understanding our brains was a huge part of our health, and
Right.
understanding our health and learning and the impact was really kind of a great
Yep.
place to start. But I think now that we have talked about understanding our brains, I feel like flexible thinking is such a huge part of it that does
Yeah.
speak to all the other topics that we talked about.
Yeah.
And I kept thinking, you know, in the world of education, there are different, and even psychology,
Right.
there are definitions for flexible thinking that go into executive functioning and all these different things.
Right.
But when I really thought about it, we go back to the word intent all the time, but I think it's the ability and the intent to think about something differently than you had before.
Right.
Really
At least that's how
simple.
we're going to talk about it here. Because you're right. Like, I was thinking about that too. Like, in the world of psychology, you know, like, if I'm talking in the field about flexible thinking, I'm probably meaning something different than what we're talking about right now. Right. Like there is a right. Exactly. Yeah. Because I mean, it's all parts of thinking flexibly, but that is a term that is used when we're looking at how certain people process, right? Are you able to think, like shift gears in your thinking? Are you able to see things from a different perspective? Are you rigid in your thinking? I mean, even that's using even diagnostic criteria, like you're saying with psychology terms. But for us, I'm with you. Yeah, we're just talking about the ability. I like the intention, because intention's a big thing for us. Right. Yeah, intentionally thinking about something differently, or even being open to the fact, like just start there, being open to the fact that there are other ways to view something.
Right. And honestly, I think that's what we're getting to, is that vulnerability is a life skill.
Right, exactly, right? It's vulnerability is part of learning. I mean, it just is.
Yes. No, it absolutely is. And I think when we're talking about flexible thinking, you were right about, not being rigid. One of the things I kind of got to too, honestly, is that if this is such an important life skill, flexible thinking,
right?
I don't think that people can go back and think about a specific lesson, like mini lesson, where they were taught this. I can absolutely go back in my mind and remember when I learned addition and subtraction, or when I learned about discrimination for the first time, or how to study. Why do we not learn how to think flexibly and revisit it consistently? I don't know. I think
it's another one of these topics that we've talked about that I think is paramount, or like core to just learning in general, being a decent human being. And none of these things we're formally taught. Yeah.
Right.
That is interesting.
It's an essential part of knowing yourself, knowing your brain, prioritizing your health.
Yeah.
And I don't think as a global population it's taught directly.
Right.
Nor is it reinforced.
Right.
I really don't.
I mean, I think more people think flexibly than they realize. I think there's more of it happening than they realize. Yeah. But I agree with you. It's not like an outspoken topic of discussion or anything like that. But it's essential to all the things of life, right? I mean, it's essential to finding your own path in life. It's essential to relationships, communication, because at its core is also empathy and compassion.
And problem solving.
100%. Same with all the things we're going to talk about today, really.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think it's the intentional ability to think differently, to sometimes that's going against the flow, like 100%, 180 degrees against flow. Other time, it might be how we used to think. Yeah, I mean, I'm right there with you.
Well, I think that kind of goes into the kind of second topic that we wanted to talk about, which was communication and
right.
All that encompasses communication. I mean, at communication's most basic form that I think other people know about, at bare minimum,
right,
communication is giving and receiving information, but that's not the way you and I talk about it.
I mean, at its core, I would agree with that 100%. It's just, there are so many ways to give and get information, and that's not always what we think about, right?
Yeah. I mean, for you and I, when we talk about our personal journeys, I know in my personal journey, I would include, respectfully, openly, securely, receiving of information.
Right.
And I hate the word feedback, but feedback.
Yeah.
And I think the really interesting part that people also don't understand about communication is the different ways that you can communicate.
Yes.
Like visual, written, verbal, nonverbal,
right.
Because it all has to do with body language and voice. And
but that's what I was saying,
voice,
right? Because if at its core communication is sharing and receiving information, there's so many ways to do that. Think about in your daily life, right? Like, yeah, you'll read a text message, you'll type a text message, you might read an article, you might listen to an audiobook, you might listen to a conversation, you might watch a movie, you might see an infographic. Like, all of that is receiving information.
Sure, yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the thing, is that people don't really talk about
right.
how that's a form of communication. But
right.
I think you and I have talked specifically about, the nonverbal piece and how
yeah.
people don't necessarily think body language is a form of communication, or they do, but they don't think about it actively. I think when we talk about voice too,
or we interpret it incorrectly. That's what I think. We know that right. I was gonna say, we know, like, research has been done for years, and like, who was it? Albert Mehrabian. I don't remember how to say his last name, but he's like a body language researcher, and he broke down. He's the person where we get that statistic that like 90% of communication is nonverbal, basically. I don't know if you've heard that statistic.
No, I haven't.
Yeah, so he broke it down and said, basically, it's more, here's what it really ends up being, is like 55% of communication is nonverbal, 38% is vocal in terms of like tone, spacing, all those kinds of things. And then 7% is the words that are used.
See, and that, I love that.
Right?
That
I like that breakdown better than just like, yeah.
Right.
That's pretty interesting.
Because I do think that people don't, and I say people don't, but I know that there are people that understand. I just also know on my learning journey, I needed to learn and understand that there are different ways to communicate. The visual, the written, the verbal, the nonverbal. Yeah. But when you go to nonverbal, we talk about body language. We talk about voice.
Yes.
But I don't, and I know you don't either, I don't mean literal voice. Do you know what I mean? Like, because we've worked with learners who cannot speak.
Right.
Or are nonverbal.
Right.
But I do think, or even if you talk about the deaf community in sign,
their
voice is through a literal different language, like American Sign Language here.
Right. But you would still have those different elements, because even in sign language, you're more emphatic with different things. You could still convey a quiet tone, a loud tone, and anger. Like, you can still convey all those things, through your hand movements and things like that.
And words, obviously, words is also another part of communication.
Right.
But I do firmly believe that without the ability to be able to communicate effectively, a person's mental health and ability to emotionally regulate will always be negatively impacted at any age. Do you know what I mean?
Yes, because I think that's why we don't like the words criticism, feedback, and critique. Because those are all, they haven't been conveyed in those ways. Like, and especially when you were talking about communication, and you were talking about respectful and compassionate, like using relational language when you talk about communication. I would even argue that maybe some of the percentage is that relational groundwork.
Right.
And that's where
criticism, they're I think it's subjective to the person who's giving it, and then it's like a perceptive, complicated process for the people receiving it. I think it's all based in judgment, which is why I don't like.
But that's the thing, right? That's what I was saying. And also when all of these, oh my God, English is hard today. I'm thinking too flexibly. My brain's going everywhere. The three of these things have at their core respect, like require respect at their core for them all to be effective. Any of the things we've talked about, like really the whole reason we're doing this and talking about that everything is learning, so that we can all respect the learning process, but have respect for everyone in the learning process, right? Because learning, it requires vulnerability. It requires us to think flexibly. When the world is already telling me messages, I'm already internalizing them. And we take criticism and feedback as just verbal representations or manifestations of the input that we're already picking up from you judging us. And it's all just, like you said, it's all wrapped in judgment. Yeah. And that's not where like acceptance is going to be. That's not where thriving is going to be. That's not where creativity is going to be. That's not where open communication is going to be. Like you've shut all of that off. So there is no understanding each person. There is not as much learning or growing happening because now we're just trying to fit in a box.
Right. You know, it's really interesting that you said all of that, because so we're talking about like people's mental health, having like communication impacts mental health and emotional regulation at any age. And
right.
You know, you're talking about boxes, and I often think of you're talking about how if you had kids, you think of your kids. I really do think of my toddlers. And
yeah, sure.
I think when talking about the negative impact at any age, you know, the easiest way to describe this is infants and toddlers cry because they can't effectively communicate.
Right.
Preteens and teens are going through hormonal changes, emotional changes,
right.
puberty,
right.
and they can't fully understand which that impacts their communication.
Right.
Or adults who
right.
have never been taught positive
right.
or healthy discourse, and they may
right.
come off a certain way.
Right.
I mean, it's why I think it's so essential to understand communication.
100%.
And I think the only way that you can really communicate openly, effectively, in a healthy way is by revisiting what communication should look like at
right.
any age.
Right.
And I think it also, you can't do it without flexible thinking.
No, yeah, I mean, I agree. Yeah, exactly. All these things are going together. And because, like I said, too, it's so easy for us to misinterpret nonverbal communication. Right? Like we've been taught for eons that if you're sitting there talking to someone and they have their arms crossed in front of them, we're taught what that means. They're closed off. They're unhappy. They're da-da-da-da-da. What if they just like standing there with their arms crossed because it makes them feel safer? Right? Like
they're form of what we're kind of taught, but I think it's very easy to not give.
But it might have nothing to do with the conversation apart from I'm talking to somebody, or like I'm not feeling good today, so I'm giving myself a hug, essentially, right? Like there's so many reasons as to why they might be doing that. We can't always assume, but once you kind of, I do make a lot of assumptions when I'm dealing with behavior, but it's like, you know, the more you do it,
problem solve.
Yeah, and the more you do it, the more you figure it out. And anyone, like I will, especially when I'm working with students, I work so hard to build a relationship with them so they know I'm not another voice coming in to judge them. I'm not another person who is going to criticize, critique, and give you all this feedback, right? Like I'm not that person. I want to do this with you. And like, I got my own stuff so I can relate to where you're feeling. But like, it makes me think of students who, I had a student one time and he was raised in a home where I'll just say they were pretty strict, right? They had very clear expectations about certain things and especially how you talked and interacted with adults. It was a very, very clear how you did that and how you didn't do that, right? So I could see on this child, he was struggling with different things and he had no idea how to articulate that to me because he wasn't like, he's frustrated and he knows I can't yell at an adult, but I'm frustrated. I need to yell. What did he do? His paper turned into the place where he did his yelling, essentially, right? He would write large. I could tell how he was feeling based on the size of his letters. Like that's where it got to, because so much of how we communicate is not through words, but I had to pick up and kind of ask questions and figure things out to get that that's what the meaning was, right? Mm-hmm. And so then I was able to create that safe space with him and be like, dude, I feel a little frustrated. Like your letters let me know you're feeling frustrated. Am I reading that correctly? And then he could let me know yes or no. And then we could go from there. Right. But
in that situation you're probably seeing them in a position where, first off, they probably didn't know or weren't fully aware that that's how they were functioning, But
Yes.
also the really interesting part is by being seen, it creates a moment of vulnerability and connection. And
Right.
by doing that, from then on, there's an awareness that they have of themselves, but you have also learned something because you've so intently and intentionally picked up on feelings. And I think
Right.
that's another part of communication that you're getting to, which is really important, is without the vulnerable community that you created for that student, there can be no creativity moving forward.
Right. 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 Because, and like, I think the vulnerable, I mean, he was vulnerable and like he was all, very exposed, right? He's frustrated and like, if he was a lion, he'd be on his back with his tummy up, like, just to eat me, right? I'm done. Take me. I'm a wild animal. You can, or if it's an animal to a lion, there we go. Belly side up. I was the lion. And, but by like meeting him in his vulnerability, by saying like, I'll be vulnerable with you. I'm going to try this out and see if this is what we're feeling. That created that safe space and the community keep going. And then from there, we were both able to say, okay, now that we know this, how can we think flexibly about what to do next, right? How can we be creative, like you said, in solving this problem and in communicating together? Because obviously that's a hard thing for you. So how can we creatively come up with a way that you can let me know you're frustrated or whatever the case may be? And yeah, I think
it for them too.
It all goes together, right? It's because, but at its core is we care about the person. We want them to feel understood. We want to understand them. We want to let them know your value isn't in what you cannot do.
Right.
Because that's where so many of us, especially when it comes to learning, because it is so vulnerable. You know how we both talk about like that playing the guitar and how that was so hard for us, and I said how mine hangs on the wall more often than is ever used.
Yes.
And it's that vulnerability thing, right? Like that reminder of I can't do this. This is hard for me. Mm-hmm. I don't love that reminder. I don't love that vulnerability. So like learning can be a really scary place for a lot of us.
Oh, absolutely.
And I love that I say that like that's a realization. Everyone out there's like, duh. Yes, no, and I just want you all like we're with you. We agree.
No, we definitely do.
And it's a hard place.
I think a lot of what you're getting to too about how creativity fits into this as our third point, skill, etc., seamlessly is that, you know, we've talked about, you were just talking about guitar. Guitar is typically in society seen as a creative outlet for artists.
Yeah.
And I think that creativity typically is synonymous globally with art.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that's the problem with creativity is it's a loftier, loaded word.
Yeah, that's true.
I think that it is boundless, which I don't think is taught.
Right, because I was thinking like it's lofty, but it's also limited in how most of us think about it. Like you said, we think of art. Yeah, and any art class I was in, I was like, yeah, I can kind of do this, but not really. Like I'm not an artist.
Yeah,
but I'm very creative.
Right. It's really interesting. I feel like my first time up at an expo, like whiteboard, it was like my second year teaching because I had a chalkboard previously, and I was like, I'm just letting y'all know, I'm really good at stick figures. I'm not good at much else.
No,
doesn't mean that I'm not creative, but I think the one thing that I found out on my journey, and I know that you think similarly to this. I think of creativity as similar to flexible thinking. But I think if flexible thinking were the noun, then creativity is the action. Right?
Shut up. That's so funny that you say that because earlier I was trying to think like it kind of, I was trying to think of what's the distinction between creativity and flexible thinking.
Okay.
I love how you said it. You just said it better though, because I think like the flexible thinking is almost like the diving board, whereas creativity is the pool.
Yeah, it's
or something like that. But I like yours better.
No. But I love that visualization because I totally see it. That ecstasy of when you're under the water and you just hit it and you're floating and like the bubbles are coming out and you're like,
Right.
If you jumped off the board, you did
That's so
the
funny
hard
that we
work.
both thought about being in water and where we could breathe better. We're both like, that's hilarious.
Doesn't make sense.
Psychoanalyze that. Oh my God, that's funny. Yeah, it's
a journey.
Because they do go together, and like, I love that idea. They go together, but one leads to the other. I was like, yeah, creativity is the action, and flexible thinking is the noun. That makes sense.
And you were talking about earlier how people probably are more flexible in their thinking. I think people are more creative than people think too. Like, it's
100%.
not just creativity in the arts. It's in our day-to-day, with our imagination,
right.
the way we express emotions, or we
yep.
write notes.
Problem solving of any kind.
Yes.
I mean, that's creativity.
And we were just talking about this too. Like, creativity is a form of communication. Mm-hmm. But it's freest, like most freeing form, because it's subjective and personalized all at the same time, right?
I see. Yeah. I also think of creativity as like, for me, it's more of that wandering idea, wandering around looking and just seeing what's there and like, what can I connect and what can I do next and what else is out there? Because I mean, laying in the grass, looking up at the clouds and labeling them as different things, right? Creativity, flexible thinking. It doesn't mean you have to be able to do anything. You don't have to make anything. There doesn't have to be an end product. There can if you want it to be, right? Sure. I like that kind of creativity too. But it's really about, just seeing things from another way and then acting on it. I love that. It's fun.
What do you think of when you think of creativity?
So a lot of things, because my brain likes collages, I guess. It just like inundates you with like, oh no, like a montage of different things happening. I mean, of course, I think of colors, artists doing things like an artist studio. I do think of musicians. I think a lot of, as I'm thinking about that though, hang on, let me finish my other thought. But I also think of like my mom being resourceful with what we had and putting things together to make something out of nothing. I think of how I can give 10 people the same question and I'll get 10 to 15 different, at least 10 different answers, maybe more. To me, it's all the different, it's like when you pull up on Waze, your destination, and it gives you a few different routes you can take to get there.
Yeah.
That to me is also creativity, right? Like that there are many ways to get somewhere, that there's something new to do. It's creating something, making something. What do you think of?
Oh, when I was like thinking of a who, it's absolutely my toddlers. They are the most creative people I know.
I love that.
No, but you want to know why though? It's
because they don't know what a box is. Exactly.
Yes, that's exactly what it is.
They don't know anything other than being creative, because creative is like they breaking down boxes. They don't have any boxes.
I watched
that. Is such a cool idea. That's such a cool concept.
But like they're limitless. They interact with their
and fearless.
Fearless. Like open-ended toys, stickers, paint. It's like wildly creative in my mind. They're even creative in the way they communicate with each other, or when they're trying to communicate with like me or other adults.
Yeah.
And if they can't communicate in a way we understand, they say the same thing over and over again, or in a different tone, or they'll use body language.
That's so funny. I love it.
It's
But how often do we do that too? That's so great.
Right, but like that's the thing. It's like it's kind of an ideal example of like explaining why these three skills work together.
Yes.
You need to think flexibly.
Yeah.
Then you do that with communicating, and it opens and allows for creativity. And I think you need all three to grow, but more importantly, to really thrive.
Yeah. 100%. Definitely on the thriving front for sure. And I think what's interesting. Sorry.
No. Go ahead.
I was just thinking about how, like, we started, when we were talking about flexible thinking, we started saying that, like, we are going to give it here's how we're thinking of it in our operational definition today. But there is, like, that, it is a term used in psychology and blah, 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 blah. But at the same time, how... No, monkey!
You lost it!
Monkey, this is not the time to unplug my brain. Wait, give me 3 seconds.
Go. Yeah.
I'm stepping back. I'm walking myself back there. Oh, got it. See, it worked. Okay. Okay. See, the monkey thought he had me. It was a quick reboot this time. Okay. So I said, we were talking earlier about like flexible thinking and how that can be like a psychological term where we kind of talk about if someone, it can give us an indication of how someone's brain works, how flexible they are in their thinking, or if they're rigid. Like part of that is hardwired. Great.
Sure. Yeah,
okay,
absolutely
fine.
agreed.
But with everything that's hardwired, we still know that these are buildable. Like that these are skills you can still acquire. Yes, we are hardwired in some ways. So there might be some, I don't want to say limitations, but some differences, like, right? Like there are things, but these are all growable, buildable skills.
Yes.
No matter how we're hardwired. Because I can be very rigid in my thinking, psychologically sometimes. I love me a good rule. I love a routine.
Yep.
And once that's once that's ingrained, that is ingrained. And it's sometimes very hard for me to shift from that. And for myself, for other people, I'm like, I get that you don't need the same routine, right? I can understand that. But for me, I need whatever. Okay, fine.
It's because it makes you successful too. That's where you define your success.
Right. There's a piece of that in there for sure.
Sure.
But at the same time, I can still practice flexible thinking. I can still grow and learn how to do that better, even with my brain being wired the way it is. You know what I mean?
Sure.
And creative, like I'm with you. We all think, like you mentioned at the beginning, that we're supposed to, like, creativity is like a Van Gogh or like a starving artist kind of person. Or someone just covered in paint, like, oh my God, this is my sacrifice to all of mankind. My contribution to all of mankind is this beautiful art piece that's breathtaking, and everyone looks at it like, wow, that's really amazing.
Yeah.
But at the same time, so like even if you're not born with that gene, quote unquote, or whatever, maybe you do rock the stick figures, but there's still so many ways for us to explore creativity and practice and expand our creative skills that, like, I will never be a world-renowned artist, most likely, unless it's abstract art. I'm pretty good at that.
Yeah, I love looking at your doodles even, honestly.
Oh, I do love doodling. The art in my head looks amazing, by the way. I wish that could just project out, right? That's okay. That's okay. But even that, like, it entertains myself at the very least, right? So it still has a value. It's still good. And I can share that idea with someone else.
Yeah.
But so I don't know.
Speaking
it's
of
interesting.
Things in our heads.
Yes.
I really do see this kind of connecting this to back to understanding our brains.
Yeah.
I do see this as some kind of flow chart. I know you love a good flow chart.
I love a flow chart.
But I think it needs to be a circle because it needs to be constant. We have to go back to all of this. It goes back to learning versus intentional learning.
Yeah.
Like no matter the communication abilities, the age of a person or a learner, or the circumstances when you're interacting with one or more humans,
right?
You're going to learn something intentionally or otherwise. I mean, it's a choice to improve. And I think that's where you were getting to. It's a choice to grow.
Interesting. Yeah.
Choice to be.
I wasn't getting there, but I'm glad you took us there.
Well, that's what I interpreted what you said.
I love that because you're so, I just didn't really make that full deep connect. I love that. You're so right.
I mean,
it's choosing to think flexibly. It's choosing to see someone else's perspective. It's choosing to acknowledge that I may not be able to watercolor with the best of them, right? But I still can, blah, blah, blah. I mean, it's choosing how to define yourself, how to unlimit yourself. It's choosing. You're totally right. That's like everything we've been talking about is just all about like intentional, understanding that everything is learning. So in that, be intentional.
Right.
Maybe that's what we should call this thing. Is that too long of a name for a podcast?
What?
Everything is learning. So be intentional about what you know. I'm just kidding. But yeah, you're right. It's all about a choice. And I think if you needed it, I will give you permission right now to make that choice. if you've never been extended that opportunity before, if you've only been taught or told that, like, here's, it is what it is. This is what you got. I want to hold my hand out to you and welcome to you and invite you to choose, to make some choices, to see things differently and be on this journey with us.
Yeah. I mean, it's not easy, but we certainly, we're our own community of two.
Right.
Let's add anyone who wants to.
100%.
That's really why we're doing this, right? Is it?
Right.
I think we were taught different ways that choice was an option, and
Right.
you and I separately were both taught within our own communities, our families of origin, our families now, that we do have choice. It's just that the way it was presented to us didn't always work best for us.
Right.
And so that was part of our learning journey.
Right.
And I think one of the things too is we take all of this with us no matter what. In every situation we have the choice, but it does take a lot of intention.
Right.
It really does. And
right.
I do think that I really do think, going back to like what the flow chart would look like.
Sorry. Yeah.
No, I was just revisiting it again because I didn't realize how, when you look at a flow chart, sometimes and if it's a circular one, it has arrows, so you know which direction to go.
Right.
I don't think it does, but
I think it can have arrows. Yeah.
Yeah, I do think that if it did and they were going both ways, that little place where you could write on the arrows would be choice. Like,
yeah.
Choose.
Yeah.
Like,
it's like a choose your own adventure.
It for sure is. I do think starting with flexible thinking, though, is probably the best place.
Could be a good entry point for people. Yeah.
Yeah, because
you can choose your own entry point. I love that part too.
And I think that part is really wonderful as well, because if you're constantly going through this cyclically and you're revisiting it, it doesn't matter where you start because it's not going to end. You just have to keep revisiting it, which again goes back to intent.
Yeah, and really that's just, I mean, if you were to ask me, that's the circle of life.
Right.
Right. It's just that constant going through these things and bringing topics up again and reevaluating them and examining yourself again and over and adding on to what you know. It's just like the cycle of life is really a snowball going down an avalanche, like getting down a mountain if you think about it.
Because that though.
We're constantly having to bring things up. I mean, that's why we talk about a lot of the same things over and over in different contexts and then in different aspect or within the different aspect, whatever it is. You can talk about the same thing so many times in so many ways, especially if you're thinking flexibly about it.
Right.
And I mean, listen, that's half of what we do around here is just pontificate on the same things over and over in different ways. Because it makes sense in different ways and we see things differently. And sometimes it's easy to look at things within the context of school or within the context of work or within the context of being a parent or within the context of Saturday versus Monday through Friday, right? Like it's easy for us to it's easy for me to compartmentalize and look at things in different aspects because some things are harder and scarier to look, to dig all the way in through things. So everyone's going to have a different entry point, and a different experience. But yeah, it's so cyclical. I'm with you.
Right. So I was thinking about flexible thinking.
No,
I just, while you're talking,
it's a good thing to think about.
Think about flexible thinking a bit more. I was thinking about how it can look in day to day, or how maybe how we can continue to grow in our flexible thinking.
Yeah.
I did come up with a couple ideas and it honestly all made me think of you.
Oh, Lord.
I was just wondering.
It's because I can do the splits, right? And that's why you think of me flexibly. I know. Whoa. I can do the splits.
Right now. Oh, see, I mean.
Now I say I can, but let's be honest. Have I tried in the last couple of years? Like 10? No. Well, I'm going to say with good confidence, I can do a split.
Right.
Yeah. I'll test that out later. I'll let you
Good.
know.
Let me know.
Not right now. I'm on the microphone, but later. If I did remember. Pterodactyl sounds of pain. I'm sorry. You were talking about flexible thinking. Yes. What are the things you came up with?
I know how
Sorry,
you
everybody. I'm sorry. I do. I love games.
You know what I was thinking would be a great game for flexible thinking?
Guess who?
Oh, I love that. I always thought of that as a language game, but I do like the flexible thinking of it.
Because you could change the kinds of questions that you ask. You could ask more instead of like, I've seen right now going around social media, it's kind of like you could play Guess Who, me using like assumed truths about them. Would your person be a barista at Starbucks? Or would your person be a barista at a locally owned coffee shop? That's two different people.
Oh my gosh,
Isn't that fun?
Hilarious. I mean, it's yeah.
On one hand, I was gonna say it can reinforce some stereotypes and blah 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 blah. But you can think flexibly about it and do lots of different things. It's a fun way to look at it. Sorry.
I've never talked to you about this one game that I was thinking about.
Tell me what game.
Have you ever played Bananagrams?
You haven't. I think I have it, and I think I have played it, but I played it like with students, and so I don't know if they were doing it right. So I don't know if I played it correctly. Oh. That was my caveat to the story. But I think I got another one. Now that you're saying Bananagrams, I thought of another game. Go ahead. You go first.
Is it Scrabble? Because Scrabble, I think, is a good one too.
I was gonna say Boggle.
Boggle, yeah.
I love Boggle. Oh, Boggle is like that's a top tier game for me.
Jam.
Ugh, yeah. 90s. Listen, it's the 2020s jam too. That's my game. That's so sad.
Oh my gosh.
But I love that game.
When we were remote, I played Boggle with a friend of ours.
Amazing.
We played Boggle with couples of ours.
Like thought of another game. I got to write these down while you're talking.
Yeah, do it. We talked about it earlier. Has a lot to do with problem solving.
Yeah.
And coming up with solutions on the fly. So it helps you to practice do that, right?
Yes, you're totally right.
So the next thing I thought of when I was thinking of testing your flexible thinking,
yes,
thought of you again.
Oh God,
was listening to comedians instead of like news or politics.
For sure.
Do you know what I mean?
Because they think so flexibly. Like we said last, I think we talked about this recently. They're all looking at things from such different angles and perspectives.
Yeah.
I mean, even sometimes just intentionally listening to people on social media tell their stories and just like live their lives so I can get other perspectives. Even that is a good one. Oh, wait. Can we go back to games? I thought of another flexible thinking game.
Yeah, do it.
You ever played Scattergories?
Yes.
Oh my God.
Too during
yes.
the pandemic.
I did that in like when I was teaching high school English. That's one of my favorite games to do in there. Yeah. I also did a lot of thinking puzzles actually at the beginning. I would always open my class with like what are they called? Rebus puzzles.
Oh yeah.
With like the picture puzzles. It would be like, a picture of a can and then
I don't know why I thought of Mad Libs, but that
Mad Libs is a fun one too.
I used to play as a kid. Yeah, it's funny you said Scattergories.
But yeah. Oh, I love Scattergories.
We used to play that at a family member's house, and it would be adults and kids.
Okay.
The youngest was like, I think they were probably 6 or 7 at the time. So they
nice.
Were right.
Yeah.
All the way up to like a 72-year-old. And
nice.
There were like 20 of us around the table.
Yep.
And
it sounds like my family.
It's
so
wild.
much fun. Because my family will get, like, you want to talk about flexible thinking. We've got the family members who are like the perpetual cheaters or the like rule benders.
Yeah.
That's flexible thinking, whether we want to admit it as the adults or not, right?
Sure.
But if someone is able to like noodle things around and like, hang on a second. So what I'm going to do is, because it doesn't break the rules per se, I'm going to stretch them a little bit. Like that is flexible thinking. That's creative problem solving. That is that's pretty great. I think it's great.
It's really
we do have the cheaters who will try to think too flexibly, and you're like, bruh, no, that's too far.
Yeah, no, that's not gonna. Yeah,
we do have some kind of a box in this game, sir. Thank you. Yes, I'm thinking of a very. No, I'm just kidding.
No,
I'm thinking of a very specific game right now. No, kidding.
I don't think I've really considered with that many people that many like those.
That's a range.
Yeah, that's a range of ages. And the idea, that's so funny. I don't think a single one of us was the same type of learner at all. And definitely our brains
That's amazing.
work differently and personality.
And then just life, I mean, and life experience, you're going to see things differently or just know different words, more words, whatever.
Yep.
Like when we place categories, there's always someone who'll be, turn it to be like black, blah, blah, blah. Like, I don't know what am I trying to say? Like, you'll take like an idea. If the letter is, oh my God, I should have had this example already. But like, they'll take an idea and then use that for every answer. Like,
oh, yeah,
flexible thinking-ish.
Creativity.
True. Right? I love it. It's the best. And I like, dude, but for this 6-year-old playing that with everybody else, what an amazing opportunity.
Isn't that cool?
Because you're hearing so many different ways to say things, or so many different experiences, and so many different, like, and I love those kinds of games, especially within a wide variety of people, just because of the stories. Like, it leads you to tell stories about different times, and that's just so fun, because communication is a big...
even though it was a timed game, it would always take 45 minutes to get through a list.
At the very least. Right. Well, and then you have to have your debates on do they count or not. So that's very important. Yeah.
I get that.
That's pretty cool. I think... I mean, they're just so, like we said, there's so many ways to continue practicing. Games is one of my favorite ways to practice all of these kinds of things. I mean, like I said, because then communication, even if someone is the classic Monopoly communication of throwing the game board. Maybe that's classic to just me. I don't know. That's like the game I hate. That's like the one game that I'm like, no. I will play nearly any other game. If you ask me Monopoly, it is a hard pass every time. Every time. There's no flexible thinking there.
I'd rather play that, though, than Risk, which I think you'd probably do the opposite. But I can't get down with it because...
It's a duration thing, and if I have to sit and wait, like any of the games, Risk is a little too... Like, even Settlers of Catan sometimes can take too long. Yeah. Unless I'm in that mood. But, like... Yeah, it's got
to like move.
It's an interesting
for me.
thing, right? I need movement. Yeah. Yes.
I will say if somebody is like, okay, and I'm not as comfortable with games because one thing I learned about myself on my learning journey is how competitive I am. And I've always been competitive. Don't get me wrong.
I'm working on it, but yeah.
And I had
I'm with you.
A dad who was my athletic coach who
same.
bred that.
Right.
So, and really reinforced it for me. For me, I know that playing games, especially a new game, is like very out of my comfort zone. So intentionally doing that creates flexible thinking for me.
Yeah.
But it puts me, the reason why I do it is it puts me in a position where I have to use my instincts and my coping mechanisms.
Where you have to be vulnerable.
Yeah.
Where you can't rely on the coping mechanisms and things you've built for so long. You have to find new ones. That's the thing about learning and vulnerability is that it's like, oh God, I've not been here before. What can I? And you might try some things that have worked before. You might need new things.
And that's what allows me to see if they work or not. But it allows me to explore the areas that I find challenging in myself. But it helps me to know that my brain is not fixed.
Right.
So neither is anything about me.
Exactly.
Again, you might systemically have things that are there and present, but it's not fixed. And that has helped me to really get to a vulnerable place and grow in my flexible thinking, because I do really think that, you know what comes to mind, honestly, for flexible thinking? Like, in my time. Yeah. In our time.
Yeah.
Is the pandemic. Like, I think reflecting on the pandemic, it really made people think on a global scale, made people think flexibly.
Yeah. And we had to think differently.
For a lot of things, or a lot of people, but I think we learned so much. Like, even just the environmental impact.
Mm-hmm. Oh, right. Yeah.
That was crazy. Or the innovations that came out of it. Like, I love me an Instacart Instacart pickup order. I really do.
Right? I mean, I think about so many times, even whether it's a grocery drop off, like a delivery, or if a grocery pickup, where I'm just like, and this is just me. And I think if I had a sleeping baby in the car right now, I would be so grateful, like even more grateful than I already am. And like how many problems were solved because of some of the innovations and changes, the flexible thinking that came out of it.
Right.
Yeah. And then it also helped people realize maybe that they're not flexible thinkers yet.
Yet.
And the hard yet in there. And that there's room. But that is the thing, right? Like, because everything is learning, we are constantly learning. And if we're constantly learning, we can be constantly growing. But because everything is learning, we're not constantly growing as a result of that, right? Because we're learning things that we aren't truths. We're learning things that like are not accurate. We're learning that we aren't good enough. We're learning that we can't do certain things. And that's not true.
Yeah.
But when you're able to think flexibly and say, hang on, is that true? Right? Like even flexible thinking is questioning things.
Well, that goes back to communication because
and all of it, right? Right. Yeah. You're receiving that information and then you have to be flexible enough to question it and say, do I want to be receiving this? How can I switch this creatively now? How can I change it and do something different so that that's not the message that I'm receiving? And then can I put this message out there in a different way? Right? Like that's.
Yeah. You're getting to this idea of like, or I'm taking what you're saying as if everyone were more flexible thinkers, they'd be more flexible communicators as well.
That's what you're kind of and I guess so. Yeah, I love how you extrapolate things that I didn't even get from my own words. It's so great. It's the best.
This is why I keep growing.
And this is why I keep growing. Me. No, but you too, because I'm like, oh wait, I guess I didn't say that, but I see it is in there. I guess, yeah. I didn't think about that part, but you're right. I was making a different connection, but you're over there with that one. I love it. And like, and because then learning, the intentional learning, if we all did this more, the intentional learning doesn't require as much vulnerability. But learning right now does, because of the systemic things, the judgment that we've heard, right? All those things. If you learn differently, there is vulnerability in learning. And it doesn't have to be that way.
Right.
I think that's why words like feedback, criticism, and critique are so harsh. Because it's that vulnerability piece, right? But instead, if we were all doing this, we were all expressing what we needed, who we are, how we're growing, having these open conversations, then it'd be more of a like, we're giving each other permission to speak truth into each other when needed. At the same time, giving each other permission to receive the truth as it's coming in action or word or whatever the case may be. Yeah. So I think like the more we can top these conversations and do this work for ourselves, the less work we all will have to do over time, because there won't be the stigmas. There won't be that requirement of vulnerability. There won't be all that. But to get there, we have to keep talking about it and we have to keep advocating. We have to keep sharing this information, keep having conversations, keep exposing people to this information, helping them realize it for themselves so that we can all, that's what we're doing. We're all on this journey. Let's keep going, right? And the more we can bring into this tribe of growers on this journey, then the less of this all we have to do over time.
Right.
That's kind of exciting.
It is really exciting. I think you're talking about advocacy.
For sure.
Probably the next skill that
I think so. It all goes into that, right? Like, because we need to, once we've learned who we are and how we operate, and that's an ongoing discovery, but once we say, okay, I'm going to accept who I am, and I'm going to start learning about myself, free of judgment, full of compassion, then I can think flexibly about things. I can communicate. I can pay attention to my communication, other people's communication. I can intentionally decide what I'm going to pull from that. I can think flexibly. I can find creative solutions to bridge how I operate with how I want to operate. And then advocacy is just sharing all this with everybody else, right? Kind of helping other people get on that same train. So I think that makes sense for us to talk about next, for sure. Next cup of coffee, and we'll talk about that.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
Cup of coffee. Let's do it.
Lovely.
All right.
All right. But speaking of, my cup is empty.
Thanks for listening to Everything is Learning.
We'll catch you next time.